Hello, everyone. Welcome to Picture This, our show where we go through every single year in Oscars history, talking about all the nominees from a given year. This year is 1961. We got 5 great movies, but first, before we get to that, let me introduce my co-host, Mr. Chad Webb. How are you, Chad?
I feel pretty, oh so pretty. I feel pretty and witty. And how are you doing, Dill?
I'm doing very well. That was a beautiful intro, Chad. If we couldn't, if there was no such thing as copyright, I would have underscored that with the beautiful music of Leonard Bernstein. Very
So I
fitting
cut
though.
it short.
Yeah, very fitting though that you opened with the lyrics of a master. As I put in the very beginning of the video, this episode is dedicated to the memory of Stephen Sondheim, a very tough loss for not just the Broadway community, but extending through to the film community because he so much of his work got adapted to film, and even if they didn't, a lot of his inspiration just reached so many composers just that are still working today and that have worked. So it's very tough to talk about, his legacy without, being sad about the recent news of his passing. But also, it's great to now be able to talk about West Side Story, which we totally didn't plan, obviously, but it's very poetic that this month is the month we decided to cover West Side Story when he did pass, and we do have another West Side Story around the corner. But we also have 4 other movies, that being Fanny, Guns of Navarone, The Hustler, and Judgment at Nuremberg, and of course, West Side Story, the Best Picture winner of 1961. But before we get into that, before we get into the movies and our rankings and talking about the Oscars themselves, let's talk a little bit about the history of 1961. We like to give you a little bit of a backdrop on what was going on in the world in 1961 because we were not alive at the time, and many of you probably weren't alive at the time. And if you were, I would love to hear your experiences living in this time with these movies and how the culture of the time affected it. But Chad, why don't you tell us a little bit about the history of 1961?
Absolutely. And my parents weren't even born then. So,
There you go. Yeah, mine
um,
neither. Mine neither.
all right. Yeah. History 1961. Mad Magazine pointed out that 1961 looks the same viewed right side up as it does upside down. The last time that
Oh,
happened previously was 1881, and the next year it will happen will be 6009. Basically, it will never happen in our lifetimes. So there you go. Um,
wow. That
does
just
that
that just
matter to
blew
you?
my mind. Wow.
um, Diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Cuba are severed. Dwight Eisenhower says farewell and warns us of the military industrial complex. John F. Kennedy becomes president. John F. Kennedy establishes the Peace Corps. The Ken doll is introduced to be Barbie's boyfriend.
Wow.
Residents of Washington, D.C. finally get the ability to vote in the presidential election. Hopefully next it'll be statehood. And U.S. freedom riders begin interstate bus rides to test the new U.S. Supreme Court integration decision. J. Heinrich Mathai recognizes and understands the genetic code, prompting the birth of modern genetics.
Wow.
Alabama Governor John Patterson declares martial law to break up race riots and restore order. Some things never change. John F. Kennedy plans to put a man on the moon before the end of the decade. Spoiler alert, he does, allegedly.
Yeah,
The first ever MLB All-Star game to come to a tie occurs at Fenway Park due to rain. The Six Flags Over Texas theme park opens, which was the first of the Six Flags chain.
Interesting.
Construction of the Berlin Wall begins. The death penalty is abolished in New Zealand. Why can't we all be like New Zealand?
Love New Zealand.
America jumps into the Vietnam War. The Nazi Adolf Eichmann is pronounced guilty of crimes against humanity and is sentenced to death,
Yeah.
which is
Very fitting.
very relevant to one of our movies.
Definitely. Yeah, such an interesting year. Do we have any births, deaths, or outlaws?
Oh, we have a ton.
Of course
Well, we
we
have
do.
a ton of births, not a ton
Yeah,
of deaths that I recognize.
that's good.
Yes,
Births
so
are
we
better than
have
deaths in general.
yes, yeah. Well, I mean, it's all a part of life. But we have Wayne Coyne, the front man for the Flaming Lips. I recently saw them in concert, and
Nice.
they were amazing.
Nice.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Wayne Gretzky, Henry Rollins, Todd McFarlane, Amy Sedaris, Susan Boyle, Eddie Murphy, Edward Highmore, father of Freddie Highmore,
Wow.
Don Mattingly, George Clooney, Dennis Rodman, Tim Roth, Ann Cusack, Leah Thompson, Michael J. Fox, Aaron Sorkin, Boy George, Kurt Smith from Tears for Fears, Ricky Gervais, Princess Diana, Toby Keith, Lisa Lampanelli, Woody Harrelson, Lawrence Fishburne, a.k.a. Larry Fishburne,
At the time.
Barack Obama, The Edge from U2, Alexandra Desplat, Billy Ray Cyrus, Tom Ford, Jennifer Coolidge, Bonnie Hunt, Heather Locklear, Eric Stoltz, Chad Smith, Dylan McDermott, Randy Jackson, Peter Jackson,
Wow.
Ralph Macchio, Meg Ryan, Tom Sizemore, Ann Coulter, unfortunately, Bill Hicks, Shane Black, Sean Hannity, unfortunately.
Wow.
Sorry to throw so much shade.
So many births. Oh my goodness. So wait, you're telling me that Leah Thompson and Michael J. Fox were born in the same year and then had to play mother and son in Back to the Future? That is hilarious.
And Eric Stoltz, the other Marty McFly,
right? Yeah,
was
this is
born
a big.
the same year.
Yeah, this is literally the year of the birth of Back to the Future. Wow, very interesting.
Oh, deaths.
Yeah.
I just have 5.
Okay.
Gary Cooper, Ty Cobb, Jimi Hendrix.
Wow.
Marion Davies, and Chico Marx.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, some big names there. Very influential. You're the music guy. Any albums come out in 1961? I'm sure there were.
Not many that I've actually heard.
Oh,
I guess my tastes don't go back this far, but we have My Favorite Things by John Coltrane, King of the Delta Blues Singers by Robert Johnson, Sunday at the Village Vanguard by Bill Evans Trio, Free Jazz by Ornette Coleman Double Quartet, The Blues and the Abstract Truth by Oliver Nelson, Ole Coltrane by John Coltrane, Africa / Brass by John Coltrane Quartet, Showcase by Patsy Cline, Djangology by Django Reinhardt, Eastern Sounds by Yusuf Lateef. Big year for John Coltrane, apparently.
Yeah, very big year. So that's the history of 1961 and all the things that come with it. And of course, there were a ton of movies that came out that year. Of course, we're talking about 5 of them now, but let's pay homage to some of the ones that didn't make the cut for Best Picture. They might have made the cut in other categories. Chad, did you have any movies from 1961 that you wanted to shout out?
Yeah, I mean, I might not have as much as you. I'm not sure. I didn't have any like Best Picture ones. A lot of these I haven't even seen, but I have 101 Dalmatians, Yojimbo, A Raisin in the Sun, The Curse of the Werewolf, The Parent Trap, Breakfast at Tiffany's, Blue Hawaii, The Innocents, and Babes in Toyland.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on a bunch of them. Yeah, big year for Disney with Babes in Toyland and 101 Dalmatians. The Absent-Minded Professor came out the year. I haven't seen it, but it's a Disney film. And then The Parent Trap, the original one. I'm more familiar with the newer one.
Lindsay Lohan.
Fellini, La Dolce Vita, I've never seen, but Fellini is a very esteemed Italian director. This was the first, I think, movie he either won an Oscar for or was directed for. I think it was the first ever Best Director nomination for him for that. Big year for Japan, like you said. Yojimbo came out this year with Kurosawa, but also Mothra, the kaiju film, came out as well. And then, of course, you hit on it. Breakfast at Tiffany's is the big one that I probably would, if I had to like sub something in, probably Breakfast at Tiffany's. And then the Children's Hour, which is another Audrey Hepburn film, which is beautiful. I'm more familiar with the play, but the movie is beautiful as well. So those are the ones I mentioned. I mean, yeah, it's a very small list only because, it's before our time, and so many of these movies carry.
I have to check out more Audrey Hepburn. I'm sadly it's a big gap for me.
Yeah, I feel like we'll cover a few of her movies here, but those are 2 of the biggest ones and they weren't nominated. So it's interesting to see what carries on a legacy even without that awards behind it. And then seeing some of these movies, which I think 2 of these I have never heard of until we were covering this year. And I was like, oh, I've never heard of these movies. And then seeing what influences it inspired and all that stuff, and seeing the movies that have pulled influence from it, I'm like, oh, these are pretty big landmarks of cinema that I just had never heard of until this show. That's what's so beautiful about this show. Chad, going into this, how many of these movies had you seen beforehand?
None of them, actually.
Okay, cool.
These were all new for me.
Yeah, all of these were new except for West Side Story. I
had only heard of 2 of them.
Yeah, okay.
I heard of The Hustler and West Side Story.
Yeah, those are the 2 that I think most people are familiar with. I had also heard of Fanny, of course, because I study musical theater, so it's based on a musical, which we'll get to. But yeah, I never heard of Guns of Navarone or Judgment at Nuremberg, but they're definitely worth talking about because especially one of them had a big influence on a very popular director currently that is working today. But Let's get into the ceremony itself before we dive into these movies. 1961, it was held in 1962. There's really not a lot to talk about. This was a very uneventful ceremony in the fact that we didn't get people streaking across the stage. We didn't get people, segregated and kicked out because of their skin color. Like there was no like notable Oscar history changing moments. Thank God for that second one, yes. But it was hosted by Bob Hope. This was his 13th time hosting the Oscars. We'll hear his name a lot because he's hosted at least 13 times and probably more after that. It was held in Santa Monica, California. Really not a ton. I mean, Federico Fellini, of course, received his first Best Director nomination for La Dolce Vita. Sophia Loren became the first actress to win, or first anyone, actor or actress, to win an acting Oscar for a non-English speaking role, which is a pretty big deal. Foreign cinema was just being appreciated more, I guess. And that was for the movie Two Women. And she's still working today. I think she had a movie on Netflix last year that I didn't see, but it was the one that the song was nominated for it. I don't know what it's from, but she was in a movie last year, so she's still working. Was the first ever person to win for a non-English speaking role, even though of course there are people who are non-American characters in these movies, even who won Oscars, which we'll talk about. But yeah, a pretty big award, and the feat. Sophia Loren is also the only nominee from her movie Two Women, and she won. And this would not be pulled off again until 1989 when Jodie Foster won Best Actress for The Accused, because it's very rare where you will be the only nominee for your movie and win an Oscar for it. I think of Christopher Plummer in Beginners and like Julianne Moore in Still Alice, like the only nomination for that movie and winning. Like it's a pretty cool feat because it means that it's strictly going on talent. It's not like, your movie was nominated, so like you have a good chance of getting nominated. They got nominated all on their own as their only nominee. Just looking, of course, I bring the chart in now. It's a new thing we do just to look at the race and what it looked like. Obviously, Critics' Choice and PGA did not exist yet. Golden Globes, we see that The Guns of Navarone wins Best Drama and West Side Story wins Best Musical Comedy, but the others get nominated except for The Hustler, but The Hustler wins the BAFTA. So it kind of was a three-way race going into the night. The front runners were probably The Guns of Navarone, West Side Story, and The Hustler, but of course The Hustler with that Golden Globe snub, and then West Side Story not being a nominee, even though it would be nominated the next year in BAFTA. It was probably up in the air, but I was pretty certain West Side Story was probably the favorite going into it, also because it just had so many nominations. So it wasn't very much of a shocker of a winner, but it's very interesting to still look at what was nominated and what wasn't heading into Oscar night. So shall we get into it, Chad? Shall we get into these five movies?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yes,
well, I'm seated. I'm seated nice and comfortably. I'm seated right on my Fanny. So let's get into it. Let's talk about Fanny.
Yeah, sure.
All
right. Fanny, directed by Joshua Logan, written by Julius J. Epstein, cinematography by, did I finish this? Cardiff something? Music by Harold Rome, Morris Stoloff, Harry Suckman. I think I had a typo. Starring Leslie Caron, Horst Buchholz, Maurice Chevalier, Charles Boyer, Georgette Annis, Salvatore Baccaloni, Lionel Jeffries, Raymond Bussieris, Joel Flateau. Synopsis.
A lot of French guys.
Synopsis. A young man and young woman fall in love, but when the young man follows his dream of leaving his hometown, he leaves a pregnant young woman behind, forced to improvise. And then I had a little note here. The screenplay is based on a book version of the 1954 stage musical of the same title by Logan and S.N. Berman, which was also adapted from a trilogy written by Marcel Pagnol. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
It's like based on a book of a musical, based on a trilogy of books. Yeah, it's very confusing. And I mean, I think the first thing you see when you see this is like, this is an adaptation of a musical. And like, I've heard the musical, I like the music in it. And they even use the music in the score. So I have to ask you, Chad, what did you think of it being a musical without the songs? Because I think a lot of people had the conversation about it with Mulan coming out last year and how like they just were like, get rid of all the songs and make it part of the background music. Do you like that change? I mean, obviously you're not comfortable. I mean, you're not familiar with the original musical, but like, did it come across to you like it was kind of like a musical without the songs, or did it feel anything similar to the vibe of a musical to you?
I watched this never heard hearing of this. Yeah. I had no idea it was a musical until like after.
Right.
So I didn't think about it in any sort of musical context. I just watched it as like a straight movie.
Right.
It'd be really cool to like rewatch it, like kind of knowing that, maybe watch
Mhm.
the actual musical version,
Mhm.
like you did. That might be just another interpretation of how to, like, another point of view of
Yeah.
how to view it.
Mhm.
But this time I just watched it as a straight movie.
Cool. And
Um,
what'd you think?
yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was really, like, I was kind of surprised. I didn't know anything about it, so I thought it was actually really funny, but also very silly. And I
Yeah.
really enjoyed that. Like, they have like the scene where they're just like trying to, I guess, play like a practical joke on people. They put like a hat over a
Mhm.
rock
Yeah.
and try and see if people will try to kick it or whatever, which
Right.
is kind of mean, but like, it's just, it sets kind of like the tone for the movie, but it's not all silly either. There's a
Mhm.
lot of like serious parts where, basically, the guy they fall in love, the guy leaves, she finds out she's pregnant, and he doesn't really know, and then like she decides to go with this older guy, and at one point I'm like, why would she like go with this older guy? But then he ends up being very sweet.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, they have kind of like a nice little setup there. Like, he can never have children. She has a child. The other guy left. It was his dream to leave. And then when he comes back, it gets really tense. And I really love like that part when he comes back, because part of me, I'm like, well, it's his kid, but then I feel like Charles Boyer's character comes in and kind of says, well, no, unfortunately you left, even though he didn't know about it, and this other guy was there for the kid, since he was
Yeah.
born, and so he's kind of the father now.
It's kind of
It's
like
kind
your
of like a
Guardians
Yondu
of the Galaxy.
situation.
Yeah,
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 there you
exactly.
go.
Right. Great minds think alike. Well, I got my little Star Lord jacket on too. It's great. Great. Love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he wasn't. He may have been your father, but
Father.
he wasn't your
But he
daddy.
was, yeah. Yeah.
But
I'll admit I like the silliness of it. I do think it works better when it is silly. I think my biggest issue with this is that when it gets dramatic, it almost seems like because you get rid of the songs, it feels like the scenes are still kind of played up to that same level of like melodrama that I think having a song there would make more sense. And I think it just comes across a little bit more melodramatic because of it.
mhm.
You're dense. Or hopeless. Or both.
And I'm just wondering, like, the runtime is so long. It's like, why not just have the songs instead of having these conversations? It just seems like an odd choice to just like,
Mhm.
no, let's just get rid of the songs and put them in the background music, and instead just have this like really melodramatic, conversation. Like, he's my child, no, it's mine, and like the staring when he comes through the window and like that dramatic moment. It didn't really work for me in those
Mhm.
moments. I do think the silly moments do work the best though. Like I think Charles Boyer's character, and we've seen him play so many other types of roles that like
Oh yeah,
seeing him be more of like the funny guy and just kind of like this more like heartwarming character, like this moral compass, like kind of grandfather or not
yeah,
grandfather, but older guy who like is taking care of these people. It was a really nice change of type for him that I really like to
yeah.
see. I was really impressed with that, and I wish it was
Complete opposite from
yeah,
Gaslight.
yeah,
So
and it's interesting because I think this is something I enjoyed, but kind of a fault for the film is that I was much more interested in his character than the actual romance of Marius and Fanny. Like I just for some reason I just wasn't connected to what they had, and maybe it's because of the absence of the music and just the melodrama of it. But like I just wasn't too compelled to him as a character, to her as a character. Like
I want to go away. I have to. I'm trapped here among people who maybe love me too much.
I felt the supporting characters, like the older man she ended up marrying, and the kid itself, and like all that was a little bit more interesting than the actual central romance. Like I just didn't feel as invested. I don't know
yeah,
why that is. Um, yeah, it
that's
just
definitely
baffles
an
me. Yeah,
interesting take, and I think you just
cool.
kind of approached it from a different perspective since you were
Yeah,
familiar with the
hmm
musical and stuff like
right,
that. So I don't know if like I would have known about the musical aspect, if I would have been
hmm
disappointment, like there could have been a song here. But
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I really liked a lot of the characters, just in general,
hmm
and they the ones like the I forget the character names, but the guy who ended up raising the kid, I didn't like him at first, and
Denise.
he really grew
Yeah,
on me, and
yeah,
he actually, you get to see him like grow up with this kid and then kind of like die, and then he goes, his father can take care of him now and stuff like that, and like he's had his
note.
Yeah, and it's really sad, but like it's also they're also like making jokes and stuff during it, and it's just like I just thought it was like handled really well. So I mean I enjoyed this one, but
I definitely think like it's one of those things where like it seems like in a musical, the purpose of a song is like when the emotion is so high that you cannot it's far beyond use of words, you sing. Like there's that like
absolutely
they teach you in theater school. It's like when you get to the point where you cannot speak any longer, you sing. And it's like it feels like they always get to that point, but then instead of singing, it's like now we're just going to be so melodramatic and Marius, I missed you. It's like it gets...
Fanny, what's the matter?
Oh, Marius. Marius, it's you I love. It's you I want.
You really need to check out Monty Python and the Holy Grail, because they
really
got that
should.
one part where the guy's like, and I want to sing, and his dad's like, no, there will be none of that.
Yeah, it feels like that. It feels like the like you're at that height, and it's like you just want to just let it all out, but instead it just comes across melodramatic. I mean, like this wasn't really for me, but I did appreciate parts of it. I think it looks great too. Like I like the scenery. I like how it's all set in like that French, coast area, like with the water and the beautiful scenic. You can tell like a lot of the backgrounds are painted too, which is really nice. But
it was a really cool location, I thought, and in France or whatever. And the other two things, one a positive and one actually kind of a negative. The other positive I wanted to add was I really like Cesario, the kid. I really like that actor, and I was sad to see that he never went on to do anything else, really, because he was kind of adorable. I was like, I just want to see this kid. I just want to see this kid hang out and just be a fun little kid. Just the way he talked was like, it's really.
It reminds you of like the Cinema Paradiso, like just
yes,
like, he
he
wide-eyed
did.
and just wants all the answers to things, not a care in the world.
The negative though, I felt like it feels like something in production with Fanny's mom. Her mouth never like matched the words. For me,
maybe it was dubbed. I don't know.
Maybe I had a different like one I watched or whatever, but like that one, I was like, this is kind of annoying. Like in kung fu movies, I think it's fine because it's just kind of what happens with those. But with this one, it was like a weird dub. But, that was about it.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I don't see anything about it, but I mean that makes sense. I'm actually reading here that Charles Boyer originally declined the role because he felt he could not sing and was not willing to lip sync. And then once they decided to drop the songs, he accepted the offer. So you know what? Maybe Charles Boyer, as much as he is my favorite part of the movie, maybe he's now my least favorite part because he's the reason why they cut the songs. But I don't know. Nice. I just think if it's a musical, there's a certain tone that a musical has that like when you just kind of stop it short in its tracks, it just doesn't work for me. But again, like I said, it's very nice to look at. Charles Boyer, really, really great in it. The kid is really great in it. So not a total miss, but not a particular favorite, especially considering we're talking about another musical today. Very, very interesting. Any last thoughts on Fanny?
I think I'm fine on Fanny.
All right, we'll set her off to sea. I guess it was him going off to sea. Anyway, Fanny was nominated for 5 Oscars, did not win any. Was nominated for Best Picture. Charles Boyer was nominated for Best Actor, which is very interesting because he is kind of not the main relationship focus of the movie, but he was, of course, probably the top billed star, so he's up for Best Actor. It's up for Best Score for a drama or comedy. I guess they split it up, but again, the score is just the songs from the musical, so I don't know why they qualified it, but hey, it is a score. They did have to convert it to musical, I guess. It was up for Best Cinematography Color, because back then it was still split up with color and black and white, and up for Film Editing. So those are the 5 it was nominated for. It did not get any of those nominations. So it came up empty-handed. It did not have anything in its hands, not even guns, not even the Guns of Navarone in its hands. That was a pretty bad segue. I'm trying it on the fly, but maybe I should go down to the bottom of the cliff and try again. Try climbing my way back up to another segue, which I just did. Let's talk about the Guns of Navarone, Chad.
The Guns of Navarone are not exactly guns you can hold in your hands, by the way.
Right.
But
Yeah, it
the
was,
Guns
it
of
was the wordplay, Chad.
The Guns of Navarone, directed by J. Lee Thompson, written by Carol Foreman, cinematography by Oswald Morris, music by Dmitry Tiomkin, starring Gregory Peck, David Niven, Anthony Quinn, Stanley Baker, Anthony Quayle, James Darren, Irene Pappas, Gia Scala, James Robertson, Justice, Richard Harris, Dumbledore, Brian Forbes, Alan Cuthbertson, Michael Trubshaw, Percy Herbert, George McKell, Walter Gotel, Tut Limkow, Albert Levin, Norman Woodland. Synopsis: an Allied commando unit set out to destroy the Guns of Navarone.
There you go. Yeah, very basic plot. A lot of these have very basic plots. It's very much like, this is it. I honestly think Fanny is one of the more more complex plots, probably. But yeah, this is very basic. It's like, you got a mission, you attempt the mission. Do you succeed? We'll find out at the end. But what do you think of this, Chad? What do you think of the Guns of Navarone?
This one was interesting. I don't love like war movies that much. Like every time like I'm going into one, I'm like, oh, is this going to be kind of a slog? And some of them surprise me, and some of them are slogs. And but this one, I feel like maybe a little in the middle, but I actually kind of enjoyed this one.
Yeah.
I didn't think that it was like the most fun, interesting movie of all time, but like I liked the characters. I liked I thought, yeah, exactly, like talking about like the simplicity of the plot. Like I felt like they spent like 2.5 to 3 hours of them trying to go do one specific thing. It's not like a whole war in a movie. It's just, hey, we got a mission to go destroy this base that has like powerful guns. And you get to see like, the dynamics between the characters. There's a little bit of betrayal in there. And people are like lying about having been tortured and stuff. So a lot of betrayal, actually. And so, but yeah, I mean, I think it flowed really well. It was an enjoyable watch. And it was very similar to another movie that I watched for the movie club that we do, The Great Escape.
Yes,
very like that a lot.
Very, very similar. Like,
and
just
I like
a
both
huge
of those
ensemble.
movies.
Yeah, huge ensemble trying to pull off this one thing. I do think I like The Great Escape a little bit more, only because like I think it's a more unconventional mission in general. I think
Prisonscapes are always very interesting.
Yeah,
movies.
I mean, Toy Story 3, Shawshank, Paddington 2, you can't go wrong. But I think what's so interesting about this is like, what I like about the show is how we paint the picture of the history, beforehand, and you kind of have to put yourself in the mindset of 1961. And like looking at it now, I'm like, oh, we see effects like these all the time, but seeing how like this one, spoiler alert, a special effects Oscar, and seeing those scenes with like the scaling of the cliff and then the explosions of the boats on the ocean and stuff, like it's really impressive to see a war film in 1961 like pull off those technical feats, which is where like, if I was ever like kind of wavering or like getting a little snoozy on like the actual plot, I would remind myself, oh, but like what they're doing cinematically is very cool to watch. And like that would kind of reel me back in, because I think the one thing about having such a big ensemble is sometimes there are characters that really stand out, especially if you've seen them in other things. Like I've seen Gregory Peck in things. You mentioned last time we talked, David Niven is one of the James Bonds. So like he's just someone you think of, like, but some of the other characters like aren't as captivating to me, only because there's so many people you can focus on in this large ensemble. So, that's just one of the issues I have with just big ensemble pieces like this, when, it's such a clear-cut mission, and some people are given, of course, much more time than others. But I ultimately did like it. I think it was a very interesting war adventure. I got to say, my favorite scene is when they're scaling that cliff, just because, like, that's, like, one of my biggest fears is heights and the non-restraint of like nothing will catch you.
Have you seen Free Solo?
I have. I'm actually very excited because they put out a new documentary called The Rescue, like, which is also supposed to be a front runner for best documentary at the Oscars. I haven't seen it either yet, but those documentary people are so good. And Free Solo, this reminded me of like the 1961 version of Free Solo, except it's a movie, so I knew everyone would be okay. Like it's a fictional piece, and and there was so much movie left to go. I was like, oh yeah, they'll be fine. But yeah, it's scary to me. Cliff jumping and climbing is very scary to me. So that
Don't watch
part,
Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. I
okay,
mean,
I will.
When Nature Calls.
Gotcha. I will keep that in mind. As much as
Don't
I love
watch
Jim
it. It's
Carrey.
hilarious.
Yeah, but no, I really enjoyed like those parts of it. I just think it was a lot of like great sequence, but then like a lot of filler in between. Great sequence, a lot of filler in between because it is so
Yeah.
long. That like certain moments stuck out more than the overall whole. But yeah, it was a very interesting adventure and ultimately one I really liked. And I think the cast is great too. I mean, you have Gregory Peck, David Niven, like we said, and just so many other people that maybe aren't huge names now, just since so many decades have gone on. But just in the movie, they give good performances. Was there like a specific moment or character or something that stuck out to you the most?
Well, first I want to say some like Eon purists may disagree with you that David Niven was a James Bond,
Oh,
but
well, true. True.
but
He played a character named James Bond in his career. So that
but
is an objective statement.
very true. But yeah, a lot of the character dynamics were really well. It just seemed like really kind of interesting, like
Mhm.
the lengths that some of these characters, especially Gregory Peck, would go
Mhm.
to actually like get this thing done, like, in the name of destroying these guns that can basically destroy all these ships.
Yeah.
We can't take any prisoners. And it's just really interesting when, like, he basically betrayed that one guy and like left him there because his leg was broken. And and then they're like, damn, it's vicious that he would just like
Yeah.
leave him there like that.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that was a great part too. The reason I brought up earlier the inspiration part, this is actually a very influential film for none other than Quentin Tarantino. He has referenced this as an inspiration behind a lot of
Wow.
Inglorious Bastards, especially
Wow.
the dynamic of the bastards themselves and like going into Germany. Like he said, a lot of it was inspired by the dynamic of the Guns of Navarone. And in Pulp Fiction, there is a quote by Samuel Jackson when he says to John Travolta,
Every time my fingers touch brain, I'm Superfly TNT. I'm the Guns of the Navarone.
so it is
Wow.
quoted in his work in Pulp Fiction, and it is inspired. It inspired some sequences in his Western stuff, like Inglourious Bastards, Django, Hateful Eight, just some of the style. So I just thought that was interesting, hearing that like he is so fond of this film because, like I said, going into this, I didn't know about this film. This was one of the two I had never heard of. This and Judgment in Nuremberg, and I just
Yeah.
reading about it and finding out that like this is one of Quentin Tarantino's favorite movies. I'm like, okay, cool. Like because it
Wow.
wasn't obviously
Yeah.
my favorite of the bunch, but like I was like, this gives me a little bit more of an appreciation for it. So thank you to this movie. It's really
Same.
interesting
Yeah.
because you would never think, Quinn and this movie, but then when you think a little bit more about it, some of it makes sense, especially the
Quentin
camaraderie
likes a
aspect.
lot of random stuff
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah. I just picture him in his den, like you see him because he has like that projector. He always tells the stories about when he brings actors into his little home theater and like putting like an old scratchy little thing of Guns of Navarone on for 3 hours and making you sit and watch it with him and be like, yeah, that's so cool. Like that's like the dream, I think, but also like a nightmare for some. But yeah, it's very interesting that it was so influential in his career and his work and movies that we will talk about eventually for sure. And we
Oh
have
yeah.
talked about Pulp Fiction, of course, but cool. So, the Guns of Navarone nominated for 7 Oscars, and it won one. As I said, special effects. It was the big winner for special effects. Also nominated for picture, director for J. Lee Thompson, adapted screenplay, best score, drama or comedy, best sound, and best film editing. So a pretty good crop of nominations. It only won the one, but I would say it's a very deserving one for special effects. Yeah, no, Quentin Tarantino, the very inspirational director, obviously inspired by this. He's quite the hustler behind the camera, if you will. So let's talk about the hustler. Why don't we? Chad, tell us about the hustler.
All right. The Hustler, directed by Robert Rossen, written by Sidney Carroll, Robert Rossen, cinematography by Eugene Shufton, music by Kenyon Hopkins, starring Paul Newman, Jackie Gleason, Piper Laurie, George C. Scott, Myron McCormick, Murray Hamilton, Michael Constantine, Stephen Girash, Clifford Palau, Jake LaMotta, Vincent Gardenia, Charles Deercop, Willie Moscone. Synopsis: Fast Eddie Felson wants to become a professional high-stakes pool hustler and beat the legendary player Minnesota Fats. Adapted from a 1959 novel of the same name by Walter Tevis.
Nice. So, Chad, you have seen The Color of Money, correct?
Yes.
See, I haven't, so this was my first introduction to the character of Fast Eddie. But I don't know if it was nominated for Best Picture, so I don't know if we'll ever talk about it. But I'd like to hear your thoughts as someone who has seen kind of the pseudo sequel to this, and then going
Mhm.
back and watching this because it's a movie about pool, which we don't see a lot of. Obviously, it's a very niche sport. Do you consider it a sport? I do.
Yeah.
But
Why
yeah,
not?
yeah, why not? But yeah, what were your thoughts about this movie and kind of like in tandem with the Color of Money too? Because it's definitely two very different films, just in terms of the eras they were made and the directors and all that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like a huge Scorsese fan, especially like his like mob movies, but I'm
Hmm.
becoming one, and I think it's the other ones, the other types of films that are bringing me into
Hmm.
the Scorsese fandom a little bit.
Yeah.
I really liked The Color of Money, and I know this is not the movie that we watched for this,
Right.
but I watched it. I really liked it. I love the Tom Cruise and Paul Newman dynamic
Yeah.
in it, and it was a really cool introduction to that character. But it's like the character of old. He's older now, and Tom Cruise is kind of his under his wing, and
Hmm.
and he's not the young buck anymore. Basically, I really like The Color of Money, but I think because I really like The Color of Money so much, The
Mm.
Hustler didn't really hit that much for me. There are a lot
Interesting.
of aspects I did like about it, but I thought it was like a lot slower, especially in
Yeah.
like the first half. And there were
Yeah.
some good scenes
Yeah.
in this, but I
Yeah.
didn't really
Yeah,
connect with this one that
because it
much.
starts with like the whole just like introduction of him, and it goes right into that like whole first 24 hours or whatever, 27 hours,
Yeah.
however long, in that one pool hall where he's playing Minnesota Fats, and he basically loses all his money.
Do you think this boy is a hustler?
And it's
Yeah.
an interesting introduction for a character because it's like no backstory whatsoever. You just kind of get this character in his element. But I kind of
Yeah.
like that because it's like you get to see him at his most comfortable being himself, or maybe least comfortable being himself, his most insecure. But like you see him in his element. Um, and then it kind of pivots into this love story really for the whole next, I would say, hour. And that to me, as good as Piper Laurie is, it's like there was so much happening with the intensity of the pool game, and then there was like that one conversation with George C. Scott of he'll play you, but only if you have $3,000 to pay. And then all the stuff in the middle. While that romance is important, obviously, to the characters and to the overall arc of the movie, it did kind of halt the action. So I see what you mean in terms of like just it feeling like it was dragged out a lot, because it definitely did slow things down. And that's obviously not a critique on Piper Laurie's performance or obviously Paul Newman's performance, but it's very much like
I've got troubles, and I think maybe you've got troubles.
just these two living in the moment and living him at his lowest with no money and her kind of when she's a lost soul and seeing how they connect.
Maybe it'd be better if we just leave each other alone.
But then I think it really reels me back in once they go to Kentucky and they have that mission to get the mayor from Jaws' money, before then going to face Minnesota Fats in the end, and then obviously you have the whole story about Sarah's suicide, which is very very sad, and unfortunate. I was a little I thought they would go more into the whole confrontation between Bert and Sarah in that hotel room that led her to do what she did.
You're hearing a rain check, and I know it. You're hanging on by your nails. Let that glory whistle ring out loud and clear for Eddie, and you're a wreck on a railroad track. Your horse had finished last. Now, don't make trouble, Miss Ladybug.
I'll say George C. Scott plays a really good like villain in this. Like it's a very unconventional villain who you think it's on his side, but he's really not. He's just a hustler too. But his just the stare he gives is very menacing. But yeah, I think this is for the most part a really good character piece more than it is like a sports movie or like an entertainment piece. Like I think the best parts are just watching Paul Newman do his thing as this
Yeah.
character who's going through so much, going through the highs and the lows, and seeing who he disregards in that path, in that like pigeonholed path to glory, and the blinded path to glory. But then seeing him eventually win is very interesting too, because like he loses the whole movie and then he comes out on top at the end, and then it just kind of ends and that's it. Again, like I think aside from Fanny and West Side Story, like these next three movies are very much this is what it is. It's this guy playing pool, losing a lot of his money, finding a lot of money, and then coming out on top in the end. It's a very basic plot, and I think because of that, it needs that extra oomph that I don't know if it has at all times, but at times it
Yeah.
does. I really like the cast, but it's a very unconventional sports film, which is both
Yeah.
working for it and against it, I think, you know?
Yeah, I think to its credit, it did supposedly like cause like this like big like not resurgence but popularity in playing pool.
Oh,
And
cool.
I think that's really cool to its
Yeah.
credit. And I agree with you. I think like the character stuff between Paul Newman, Piper Laurie, and other
Mhm.
characters were really good. And I think I remember him getting like respect from Minnesota Fats at the end
Mhm.
and stuff like
Yeah.
that's just really cool. But I think it's just a lot more moments in that were better than the movie as a whole.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think like with The Color of Money, as you'll see whenever you
Yeah.
check that
I
out,
plan on checking it out now, yeah.
I think they did. Scorsese added like this really cool kind of like jazzy score throughout the
Mhm.
movie, and I thought that aided it really well. And I don't think this movie had anything like that. So
You're right, yeah.
I
It
just
feels
really
almost empty at times, you know, like,
Yeah.
and I guess, like, that is kinda to the point of the characters feeling empty and kinda like they have nothing left. It could
Mhm.
be seen as that way, but also from an entertainment standpoint, especially when all these movies are longer than 2 hours, some of them 3 hours, it's
Mhm.
like, you need to be able to hold our attention, and, it sounds like it held it for me more than you, but, like, I do get the whole idea of, like, it being a little bit of a slog in the middle, at least, like, that second
Yeah,
act for
I
sure, but
probably owe it another watch at some
yeah,
point.
I mean, I do think it definitely hooked me at the end, which is good, and
Yeah,
and
it
and
did for
that
me
that
too.
beginning scene I found really exciting too, just because it was like the mystery of who this character is. Is he hustling this guy? Is Minnesota Fats really as good as he is? Like, there's that mystery of not knowing that is so exciting. And then of course his little sidekick Charlie and that dynamic and how he's the last one there. All the guys have left, but Charlie stays by his side. But then to see how he immediately turns on Charlie, like I find the beginning and the end so interesting, but the middle for me just kind of
Yeah.
dragged on a little too long. But again, great performances. Like I think
Yeah.
of all these movies, like this has. I mean, I don't want to tip my hand for later, but like I have a lot of performances here that are some of my favorite of this group.
Mhm.
Yeah, just some really good performances, and not just Paul Newman, but like a lot of the supporting performances, even in the smaller roles, do make an impact and leave their mark, which is
Yep.
cool. And it made me want to play pool. Like you said.
Oh, I always want to play pool. It's fun as hell.
I did have a question though for you. I don't know if you can answer this. I asked my parents because I'm home for Thanksgiving, so I watch this with them. And I have a question: what is the difference between pool and billiards? Do you know? Because I don't, and I wasn't able to figure it out because in that one scene in Murray Hamilton's basement, he's like, "No, we're playing billiards," and I realized there weren't pockets, and I was like, I don't know what the actual. I didn't know there was a difference, and I don't know if
I've
anyone does.
always thought billiards was just a fancy name for pool. I know there's
I thought
different
so too.
forms of pool.
Yeah,
Like
maybe
there's
it's like
the
the
8
billiard
ball and
table. I don't know. Yeah, it was very
maybe
confusing
it's
to me
different tables.
because there was just no pockets, and I was like, I just didn't know what the premise was. I think that's one thing about the movie that's hard to follow is like exactly what type of pool they're playing because like I feel like everyone kind of has their own house rules of how to play pool at times. You know, like
And
'cause
I
there's,
also
like, the 8
don't
ball, 9 ball.
know if Paul Newman in the movie was playing with the balabushka, which is
Oh,
apparently a really fancy, expensive pool stick, and they
interesting.
say it a lot in The Color of Money because
Oh, cool.
he gifts Tom Cruise a
Mm.
balabushka, and he's really excited about it.
Yeah, like this movie really piqued my interest in pool and billiards, but like the whole time I was trying to figure out, I was like, wait, so what is the premise? Like, isn't the 8 ball supposed to be last? And like, it's just an interesting way of playing pool.
Yeah.
It was just very interesting. It gave me a lot of questions, and I like films that answer questions, but I also like them when they give them.
Watch it again with the pool player.
Yeah, I should. I used to consider myself a pool player, but then watching this, I'm like, yeah, nope. the one shot where he hits the ball and it kind of like hits and then turns back around.
Some people are super serious about it. I know
Yeah.
my parents have won trophies in pool and stuff. Maybe
Wow,
I'll
that's
try to
impressive.
watch The Hustler with them and see if they know.
Wow, that's like really impressive. That's like a cool fun fact. That's like a great party like icebreaker fact. If you ever play one of those games where it's like 2 truths and a lie, you're like, yeah, no, my parents have trophies in pool. Like that's pretty cool. It's a cool claim to fame.
That's true.
Yeah. Any other words though on The Hustler?
No, I think I'm good.
Cool. All right. So up for 9 nominations as well. Actually, no, the last one was 7, so 9 nominations. And it wins for 2 awards. It wins for Best Cinematography, Black and White, and it wins for Best Art Direction, Black and White, which, all those pool halls are very well designed, very well deserved. It is also nominated for Best Picture, Best Director for Robert Rosen. It is nominated for Best Actor, Paul Newman, who would go on to win for Best Actor in The Color of Money for the same role, but he didn't win it here. Best Actress, Piper Laurie. Best Supporting Actor for Jackie Gleason and for George C. Scott, and for Best Adapted Screenplay. So a lot of deserving nominations. I'm sure we might talk about the performance or one of the performances later, maybe. I don't want to tip my hat too much. But yeah, it wins for Best Black and White Cinematography, just like that little 8-ball. It's nice and black and white. You know what else is in black and white? The Judgment at Nuremberg. Let's talk about it. Chad,
All right.
tell us about The Judgment at Nuremberg.
Sure. Judgment at Nuremberg, directed by Stanley Kramer, written by Abby Mann, cinematography by Ernest Laszlo, music by Ernest Gold, starring Spencer Tracy, Burt Lancaster, Richard Widmark, Maximilian Schell, Marlene Dietrich, Montgomery Clift, Judy Garland, William Shatner, Howard Kane, Werner Klemperer, John Wingraf, Carl Swinson, Ben Wright, Virginia Christine, Edward Benz, Torben Meyer, and other people, too.
Yeah.
Synopsis. The Nuremberg trials take place in which perpetrators of the war crimes committed during the Holocaust are put on trial. It's always tradition when I mess up names, isn't it?
Yes, it's okay. I mean, especially with the older ones, like, Fanny's dealing with so many French names, is dealing with so many German names. Like, it's tough. And not every name is William Shatner and Judy Garland, which I've got to say, never thought I'd see a movie where Dorothy Gale was in the same room as Captain Kirk. But I'm here for it. A very interesting movie because this, more than any other movie, is exactly what the title is. It is the trial. It is the judgment. It is even more so than like Trial of Chicago 7. Like this, the amount of scenes that are outside that trial itself, like I could count on my fingers. Like it really is all in that courtroom, which makes such an interesting dynamic. But there's also that trap of it is 3 hours and it is all in one location. So it really has to hook you with the dialogue and the performances to really make it worthwhile. And they have to bring something fresh to it to make it watchable for 3 hours because there are lots of heavy themes going on. It is all based on historical, events, even though it is a fictionalized version of the trial of 47. But yeah, it's got a tough mountain to climb. It's got that tough cliff to climb like Guns of Navarone because it is that one setting and you've got to be able to entertain and keep people's patience for 3 hours. Chad, did it keep your patience for 3 hours? What did you think? Did you...
Oh, yeah.
Wow, okay, cool.
So, like, I mean, it does, like, kind of, like, go off to different places a little bit, but a majority of it does take place in that courtroom. And the first little bit of it, too, is kind of setup of the actual thing. It doesn't begin, like, when they're all seated doing the trial. Like, there's a little bit of a setup, but, like, once they start actually doing the case and you're trying to figure out, like, how bad Burt Lancaster's character was or if he was bad at all or and you get the back and forth between the defense lawyer and the prosecution lawyer. It's very compelling because it deals with one of the worst events in the history of the world.
I'd arguably say the worst.
I mean, you have but it's so heavy, and I think they handle it so well. It's very compelling, but it's also at times very, very hard to watch. Just like a lot of these movies, Life is Beautiful, Schindler's List, a lot of these movies that are so heavy. But I think it does it really well. It's not like overly, heavy, but when they started playing the one guy was playing the scenes from
clips,
the actual event and just kind of explaining what they were. It's just like, oh my God. All right. And I really, really enjoyed the rest of the court stuff. And I just like watching a good court movie, no matter really what it's about, as long as it's compelling. And this one definitely was.
And I think they
for me.
do make some interesting choices just cinematography wise, like finding those moments to like zoom in on certain characters and picking which characters to focus on, and like I think that's interesting and it keeps it different from like if you were just watching like a real courtroom or like a stage play. You know, like it gives it some sort of personality that makes it feel cinematic, even though it is in that one space. Well, what are you laughing at, Chad?
I'm laughing just because, like, when you're talking about the zooms, some of the zooms that he did was just so quick. I went like,
Yeah, yeah, they are abrupt and jarring at times, but I think that keeps it interesting and at least visually compelling and different. Yeah, I did feel the length a little bit just because it is 3 hours, but I really do think it brings up so many interesting conversations. Like I think the conversations it can spur are almost sometimes more exciting than the events of the movie itself, and I think that's a good thing. Like getting you to think about these bigger issues, and then also relaying them to today and what it means to like, you know, be blasted for something that not aren't necessarily supportive of, but you're also still kind of technically responsible for, and like what it means
yeah,
to be like Burt Lancaster's character. And I think the best scene, as great as the trial is at the end when he does talk to Spencer Tracy's judge character and he does say like, I would have done the same, and like I'm the one going to jail for this, and like you did the right thing. Like I am ashamed of what I did. And he's like, I never supported it,
yeah.
but I also aided in it.
By all that is right in this world, your verdict was a just one. Thank you.
That whole idea of being a bystander or being just tagging along with the group because you don't want to be ostracized or outcast. And then also being, Maximilian Schell's character, who won the Oscar for this, being the guy who has to defend it and has to bring up the bigger picture of, you guys have done just as shitty things, maybe not as shitty, but like you've dropped bombs on other countries.
No, Your Honor, no. Germany alone is not guilty. The whole world is as responsible for Hitler's Germany.
It really causes you to think, and it brings up some very deep and sometimes tough conversations. And I think a lot of people in 1961 definitely probably weren't ready to hear them, but I think that's what makes it a compelling and a good movie to come out at that time, because it's 20 years or so separated from the war, so it's just past it enough that like you can start talking about it again. I feel like it's almost kind of where we're at now with like 9/11. Like we're 20 years past, and like how does it feel still seeing media and hearing about 9/11? To us, it's kind of like what they felt watching this movie in 1961, and it's compelling. Yeah, and again, great performances all around. I mean, even William Shatner. I like William Shatner in this. I thought he did a great job. Judy Garland has some scene-stealing moments. Obviously, Maximilian Schell wins the Oscar for it. Spencer Tracy. I just looked. Fun tidbit. He is tied with the most nominations ever for Best Actor, tied with Laurence Olivier with 9 nominations. So this was one of his 9. He didn't win for it, but his character is so compelling too, because he almost feels like this immense pressure and burden hanging on his shoulders, which is just so interesting as well. Yeah, I really like this movie as well. I think it's very well done, especially given the fact that it is long, and the fact that I only checked my watch maybe twice or 3 times in the span of 3 hours isn't that bad. Only because I was like, all right, I've got other things to do today. Like I'm just making sure we're still on track. But it wasn't like this is taking forever. I was very, very compelled. And I liked also the detail of like having the headphones on and that language barrier. I thought that was also very interesting too. It just added this extra dynamic that it can't be an Aaron Sorkin like courtroom scene, because half the people, or the majority of the people in the courtroom, have that like barrier of the language barrier, and having to communicate differently and not being able to process information the same. Like I just think it makes a very interesting dynamic for sure.
Yeah, I also think like the movie is like the subject matter is so heavy that you have to kind of take your time with it, because like with Aaron Sorkin writing Social Network, it's like it's fast paced, but the subject matter is not that heavy. Like did they have the idea or not? But yeah, with this one, it's very heavy, and you actually reminded me of a lot of stuff where they definitely had parts where they didn't just sit there and like show that, oh, German people are bad and they did this and they're terrible, and they actually kind of showed like they humanized people a lot, where they went and they showed that one woman who's like, I won't say Hitler did all bad and stuff, and like you're like, well, okay, but and it's almost like, I don't want to get too political here, but it's almost like where we, our former president here would do like really horrific things, and then people would go like, oh, but he's not all bad, he's just a jerk and stuff. And it's just like when people start to kind of get like really they'll just push that aside. But anyways, I'm just saying like that they raised a lot of like interesting concepts, and I do like a lot of that too.
It's so relevant to today, and it was so relevant back then. It would have been relevant in 1945. Like, I think this is a movie that is timeless because of the themes, and I think I love to see a movie that is relevant still today, as sad as it is, but a good reminder of like how we need to like carry ourselves and what is right, what is wrong, and also just the burdens that prosecutors have to feel sometimes. Like, I mean, being a judge in this scenario, like, you never really think about the judge's perspective. You think about like the defendant, you think about the person, you think of every person, the lawyers, but like sometimes you just gotta think also like the judge's stance in it, and like the burden sometimes that they have to feel too. I thought it was very compelling. So Judgment at Nuremberg is nominated for 11 nominations. This is tied for the most of the night with another movie we'll talk about in a sec. It wins 2 of them. It wins Best Actor for Maximilian Schell. It wins Best Adapted Screenplay. And it is nominated for Best Picture, Best Director for Stanley Kramer, Best Actor for Spencer Tracy, loses it to another actor in the film. It is up for Supporting Actress for Judy Garland, Supporting Actor for Montgomery Clift, Art Direction, Black and White, Cinematography, Black and White, Costume Design, Black and White, and Film Editing. So a lot of nominations for this film. Didn't win a lot, and that's because the next film we're talking about won a great deal. Let's leave Germany and come back over to the West. Let's talk about West Side Story. Chad, take it away.
All right. West Side Story, directed by Robert Wise, Jerome Robbins, written by Ernest Lehman, cinematography by Daniel L. Pfapp, music by Leonard Bernstein, starring Natalie Wood, Richard Beymer, Russ Tamblyn, Rita Moreno, George Chakiris, Simon Oakland, Ned Glass, William Bramley, and that's all the acting, because here's all the singing voices. Marnie Nixon, Jimmy Bryant, Tucker Smith, Betty Wand, and those were like the main ones. Synopsis. As rival gangs tussle in the streets of New York City in the 1950s, a boy and girl from opposite sides of the tracks form a forbidden romance. The film was adapted from the 1957 musical written by Leonard Bernstein and Stephen Sondheim, which was itself an adaptation of Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah. So as I said earlier, Stephen Sondheim, one of the greats, we just lost him. So watching this after his passing definitely hit me hard, because I just love so many of the lyrics in this thing. But the music is great too. The Bernstein music, I mean, there's a reason why there's such a long intro of music and there's that intermission. It's because they really want the score to shine, the music to shine. But so many other things shine in this film too. It's a very colorful film. They definitely make use of that cinematic Technicolor, advancement and all the different rich colors and sets and all that, and the performances too. So Chad, you had never seen this, and I'm curious to get your take. I tip my hat a little bit that I do like this film a lot. It's a very sentimental one to me, just being someone who comes from a musical theater background, but also just like having an appreciation for New York as well. And just stories of people who are in minorities as well. Like there's just a lot I like about it. And as a Shakespeare buff, just Romeo and Juliet. I think some of the best adaptations are these reimagined Shakespeare movies, whether it be this or The Lion King as a reimagination of Hamlet. So very interesting. But Chad, I'd love to hear your take on West Side Story.
Okay, so I watched this, for the first time for this, and it's one that I had been always meaning to watch. I grew up, doing drama club in high school, stuff like that, but I never went the full route like you did and was like, well, let me pursue this as like a career or even a hobby. So, I I don't know a ton about musical theater.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to learn more, especially after watching Tick Tick Boom. It
Mm-hmm.
really, because I grew up loving musicals like Rent, Grease, a lot of classics and newer ones, and but I never got around to watching this one for some reason. It just never hit me. I've never been a huge classics fan anyways, but I'm trying to get better with a lot of that. So getting to watch this for the first time was interesting because I'm like, this one is hyped up so much. I didn't actually know, even watching it for the first time, that it was a Sondheim musical. I didn't know anything about it really.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew the thing I did in the beginning, I'm so pretty. I knew that. Like, I'm pretty sure I jokingly sang that for an audition one time in high school.
Yeah.
And as a joke, but
right.
But
good song.
But like watching this for the first time, I expected to really love it a lot because I like that song, and I was like, I love Natalie Wood. It's from Miracle on 4th Street, which we'll get to another time. But maybe. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, with this one, like I was watching it with the wife, and we were both kind of looking at each other like, I don't know if I love any of these songs really. Like, and I think the big thing too with it was that I think a lot of the brown face was like throwing me off.
Okay. Yeah.
Where I know a lot of people kind of shrug it off. They're like, oh, it's, a really respected musical, Sondheim, all this stuff, and I definitely respect it for what it did for, everything, its legacy. But like, I don't know, just trying to get into this movie, I was like, well, a lot of these songs are very talky. I'm not a huge, talky song fan.
Right.
And then, I'm not a huge Shakespeare fan like you are.
Right.
I'm very, very interested to see what Spielberg does with the next one.
Yeah.
I'm hoping maybe I might like the updated version a little more, despite having Ansel Elgort in it. But
well, that's
I liked the story. I liked the story. I liked the dancing, the choreography. And the sets, like you said, and just the setting itself. I liked a lot of that. I like the snappings.
It translates very well to the screen. Like it feels like some musicals, it like if you put it to the screen, it sometimes just feels like just a filmed musical, or like it still has a restraint. But I feel like this really played around with the different neighborhoods and different locations, like having Cool set in that little parking garage and having them like jumping, but making sure they don't touch the tippity top because they're like enclosed in that little parking garage space. Like I love things like that, like just playing around with the different like playground of the city and what that entails, and the idea that these are gangs. They lurk around the city. They kind of hide like almost like rats and rodents around, like kind of lurking in the shadows. And that idea of just the city being so big and these little jets and sharks just like kind of swimming around it, this giant sea of concrete. But I get what you're saying.
By the way, Dill, are you a jet or are you a shark?
I mean, I would have to be a jet only because I don't want to be culturally offensive. But
I'm neither because I'm a lover. I'm not.
I was gonna say I definitely root probably a little bit more for the Sharks. I think the Jets kind of have the cooler songs, but I do think the Sharks are some of the more likable characters. I do want to address the brown face thing because I do think it's important to look back and realize that was not okay. But I do think they don't really make a mockery of it, which I do appreciate. Like it did seem like just at the time, that's just kind of what they did. Like there weren't a lot of Puerto Rican actors to choose from, which is why I'm glad it's getting a revamp, because now you can get it with a more historically accurate casting, which is one of the big pluses I think this remake is going to have over this one.
Yeah.
Though I don't think it distracted from me, only because it wasn't like a stereotype. It seemed like they still honored the culture well. But I think that's a big aspect to look into, especially looking at it from a modern lens and looking at every aspect and not just the story or not just the music, and looking at it from that perspective, especially with a story that handles race and makes race such an important part of the conflict, and the idea of the segregation. How familiar were you with the actual Romeo and Juliet story going in? Like, did you kind of see things coming because you knew that story, or was it kind of like just a fresh reimagination that like brought up some memories of like Romeo and Juliet. Like
I think I kind of forgot that it was like a
Mhm.
Romeo and Juliet thing until like midway through the
Right.
movie, and then I was like, oh yeah, that's right. This is like a
Mhm.
whole take on that, and I thought they did it really well. Like I thought
Mhm.
it's just really interesting when you're like, oh, it's like two people, they're not supposed to be together,
Yeah.
and yet they fall in love. And I like the two actors that were the Romeo and Juliet counterparts. I mean,
Yeah.
one was Natalie Wood, right? So
Yeah, and
I
the other
liked,
one, I don't know if you recognize him, but Richard Bamer. Do you know who Richard Bamer grew up to be? I'm going to show you a picture, and it might blow your mind. Because you watch a show that I know is very fond to you, but I didn't know. I've never seen the show, but I know Richard Bamer was in it. Let me find a picture of him.
I'm preparing to have my mind exploded right now.
Yeah, so you love Twin Peaks, don't you?
Yes.
So that is Tony from West Side Story in Twin Peaks: The Return. Let me get a picture of him in the.
I don't actually remember. I've only seen The Return once.
This is the original Twin Peaks. Yeah.
Are you kidding me right
that's
now?
Tony. Yep.
That's him?
I knew, because he's not someone you immediately see and recognize the name and recognize the face, but I was like, Chad is going to freak out when I tell you this. I'm glad I got it on camera.
This is insane, because that's two Twin Peaks actors in this whole slew of movies. Because Piper Laurie's also in Twin Peaks.
Piper Laurie. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there you go. So it was cool to see him sing. I honestly think he's probably the weak link in terms of singers, but then seeing that he didn't sing his own vocals makes me feel a little bit better about it. Because I do think the only thing with this, and I'll admit, I was a lot fonder of this musical. Rewatching it now, I pulled out a few faults that I noticed, and one of those being the fact that I do think the dancing and the artistic vision and the direction and choreography are all a little bit stronger than the vocals themselves. I think the singing does kind of come second, but I'm okay with that, because it kind of gives it a more grounded feel of like, these are just some guys on the street. So it would make sense that they're not like the best singers, but I would have liked maybe a few better voices in the pack.
I kind of actually wanted to see like what you would think, because I know that you told me before that you don't like it when people like lip sync and things.
Yeah,
Does this bother you?
The thing is, it's kind of just looking at the time period. Like if it were to happen now, I think there's so many people who are capable of singing and acting and dancing.
They'll just train them like Andrew Garfield.
So. Yeah, that's amazing. Amazing transformation to learn that he sang for that role, learned how to sing for that role is great. But like, I'm fine if in that time period I get like having singers dub, especially if you have someone like Rita Moreno, who is a person of color, being able to play that role and not necessarily sing that role, so you have someone else singing that role. Like that's fine to me, to keep it more authentic to the person, to the character. But I agree. Like I like how this new version is going to have actors who actually sing and do Broadway and stuff, like actually sing these roles.
Yeah.
Because I think Tony has some beautiful ballads. Obviously the song Maria that he sings, and then like their duets together, like Tonight, when they're on the balcony, or the fire escape, which I love. That's like the homage to Shakespeare, the balcony scene, the Wherefore Art Thou, Romeo, and it's a fire escape instead of a balcony. Like it's a really interesting reimagination. I do think watching this again, I was a little less impressed, only because as a more mature viewer, because I haven't seen this in years, I did start to pick out a few things that I was like, that's a little dated, or I didn't love that, or that song doesn't work as well as the other. But it still is a musical I hold near and dear to my heart. Of course, like some of the songs are just all-timers for me. I love the song Somewhere. America is a great fun tune, and I love the whole Tonight quintet when they all sing Tonight again when they're getting ready for the Rumble, and it's like the Jets and the Sharks, and Anita has her own thing, and Tony has his own thing, and Maria has his own thing. It's like it kind of feels like the backdrop for like Hamilton nonstop, where each character is in their own little world singing together, and you bring all the motifs of the show together. It kind of set the template for that kind of Act 1 closer.
Nice.
And stuff like One Day More and Les Mis and all those things like that kind of, I like to think, comes from West Side Story. But I'm very appreciative of it as a theater fan, as both a Shakespeare and musical fan, seeing how they were able to translate it. And I think it's a good way to tell the story without having to sit and figure out what the hell they're saying, because it's Shakespeare. I think it's nice that it's like, no, it's easier to follow. You got the two rival families, they fall in love, the families are trying to tear each other apart, instead of Tybalt, you have Bernardo. Instead of Mercutio, you have Riff. They kill each other in the fight. Tony kills Bernardo, and it ends up being her brother, and that whole dynamic. And yeah, I really, really enjoy this one, and I get, especially from a modern lens, it not working as well as it did, but especially just the visuals. I just love how the dance is almost a part of the mise en scène of the whole setting itself, like the shadows of the dancers and just the whistling coming through the streets. It kind of fits the vibe so well, and I'm really excited to see what Spielberg does with it, because I think he has an understanding of the scope of the film, but he can bring a more modern sensibility to it, more authentic performances, bring real singers in. I don't know if Ansel Elgort can sing, and he's a little problematic now, but again, I don't think Tony's supposed to be the guy you're most focused on. I think it's more Maria's story, and because Tony does kill a guy, he does kill her brother, and that's a big deal. That's not a good thing, even if it's an act of love,
Yeah, I think it's actually kind of interesting, because now that you bring that up too, and I kind of mentioned this too. The whistling and like the snaps are like kind of so iconic. I feel like if you had a trailer that was just black and you had the whistling and the snaps coupled together, you'd go, "Is this a West Side Story thing?" So I think that's great, but I think also my because I watched it once, if I watch this again down the road, I could change my tune a little bit. I think a lot of the times for me, when I hear songs for the first time, especially just like watching a movie, they don't always hit me the first time. I think Hamilton did. Pretty much every song kind of hit me the first time, but like even watching Tick Tick Boom, I don't know if anybody's seen Tick Tick Boom other than you and me, but
I hope
the song, I hope so too. But the first song, 3090, I was like, do I like this song at first? And then now I'm obsessed with that song, and I'm always singing it around my house. So there it is. Maybe West Side Story will hit me harder. Hit me more next time.
Yeah. Did you have like a favorite song in this? Like just one that stuck out as your favorite?
Probably the one I knew, the I'm So Pretty song. Yeah, I mean. Yeah, the I know a lot of people like that America one song. I like that one too. But yeah, probably just those couple, and then the Tony one, I think, is his name Tony.
Yeah,
the main character. Yeah, his song. Yeah.
One thing I also really love is just this is the last note I'll say about it, but like the idea of like the love at first sight, I feel can get a little cheesy in film, but I really like how they do it in this film, where they're all at the gym and it's filled with people, and then the camera decides to blur out everything except for the image of Maria and Tony seeing each other for the first time, and it actually feels like authentic, like they are actually falling in love in that moment. And then again, when they're on the balcony, even though there aren't people around, it's still blurred on the sides, and it's just them in the center of the frame, and it's crystal clear. It's the two of them, and I love that framing device of kind of making it seem like the rest of the world just fades away, and it's only them in their own little world. And I mean, that is when I imagine what love at first sight is, because I don't think I've ever experienced it. Maybe like celebrity shock of seeing a celebrity and being like, just like, oh my God, I love you, I don't know what to do.
It's probably rare.
Like, actual love at first sight, though, like when I hear about it, that's what I envision, is just the whole world just kind of blurring away, and the only person you see in the sea of blur is that person. And I think this film captures that really well, which makes you root for them from the top, and it makes the end even more heartbreaking. And like that's why I asked you if you knew Romeo and Juliet, because like obviously, even if you don't know Romeo and Juliet, a lot of people know that he thinks she's dead, so he kills himself, and then she realizes, and he doesn't kill himself in this case, but he asks someone to kill him. Like he goes in knowing he's going to die for this, because
I thought that might happen at the end.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's tragic, but it ends on a positive note, because it kind of brings those two sides together, and it's kind of a similar thing with like Judgment at Nuremberg, where it kind of like forces you to look at both sides and what's been going wrong on all sides, and finding a way to come together and learn from those mistakes, which I like. And that's kind of the stuff I pull from it, not like the brown face and the lip dubbing and the lip syncing and all that stuff, which isn't great, but it's for the time, I understand why they do it, and they don't make a mockery of it. They really embrace the culture, which I do like, but it will be, I think, even more effective as long as it's not a shot-for-shot remake. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Spielberg brings to it. And I don't think it will be, because also there are things from the movie that are out of order in terms of the musical. Like in the musical, Riff sings "Cool" with the Jets earlier before he even dies, and Riff dies in this movie, and then they sing "Cool" later on in the parking lot. So it'll be interesting to see if he, rearranges certain songs, adds some things, cuts some things. But yeah, that's West Side Story. Nominated for 11 Oscars, just like Judgment at Nuremberg, except it wins 10 of them. This might be one of the biggest percentages until like Lord of the Rings came along for just the most Oscars won for nominations. The only one it didn't win was Adapted Screenplay, which it lost to Judgment at Nuremberg, but it wins all these awards. It wins Best Picture. It wins Best Director for Robert Wise and Jerry Robbins. It wins Supporting Actor for George Chakiris, Supporting Actress for Rita Moreno, Score for a Musical, which I guess counts back then, but I wouldn't count it now since it was pretty much the same score that Bernstein did before for the musical. Best Sound, Best Art Direction, Color, obviously. Cinematography, Color makes sense. Costume Design, Color, obviously. And Film Editing. I mean, it is just a gorgeous spectacle, whether you're on the wavelength of the plot or the songs or not. I think everyone can appreciate the look of it and how beautiful some of the colors look and the choreography. So, yeah, it's a very special film to me, and I'm glad you checked it out for the first time. And it sounds like you enjoyed it, even if you weren't as ecstatic about it. I'm glad you enjoyed it in some capacity. So
I didn't hate the movie.
Yeah. I don't think I hated any of these movies. Maybe one I was just like a little just annoyed at some of the choices. But yeah, I think I like these movies. So how about we rank these movies, and then we determine our Best Picture winner for the year.
Do you want me to go first?
Sure, go first.
I think I'm gonna break your heart, man. 5, West Side Story.
Wow, I was not expecting that, but okay. Number 5, I don't know if I'm breaking your heart, but Fanny, I have at 5.
Nope.
Okay.
4, I have The Hustler.
All right. 4, I have Guns of Navarone.
Okay. 3, I have The Guns of Navarone.
At number 3, I have Judgment at Nuremberg.
At 2, I have Fanny.
At 2, I have The Hustler.
1, Judgment at Nuremberg.
And number 1, I have West Side Story. So I think with the math, my 1 is your 5. My 2, where do you have The Hustler?
4.
2 is your 4. What is your, and 1, 3. So I think 1, 3 beats 2, 4. Yep. So Judgment at Nuremberg is our Best Picture for 1961. Chad, this was a great year, but we have to give our trophies to our Best Actor and our Best Actress of those movies, just those 5 movies, but we can go with any actor or actress. It doesn't have to be someone who was nominated or won. Chad, I believe I am first for Best Actor this time, right?
Actor, yes. Yep.
Cool. I was between 2 actors from the same movie. I could go with the more obvious choice, but I'm going to go with the less obvious choice just because I was surprised by how much they impacted me and how much I thought their character was so interesting and kind of menacing. So I went with George C. Scott from The Hustler. I really enjoy this character. I think he's one of those characters that at first you kind of just don't blink an eye at. He's got a good presence, but the second half of the movie is really where he kind of takes over. You think he's kind of helping him out, bringing him to Kentucky, saying, you know what, I got your back, we're going to get this money, and then immediately turns on him, has that drama with his girlfriend in the hotel room, which leads to her death, and then that last scene where he's playing pool, and it's really him playing Minnesota Fats, but really it's him, kind of digging at George C. Scott's character, Bert, who's sitting there and just has this really menacing stare on his face, and just that last interaction between them.
So help me God, Bert. I'm gonna come back here and I'm gonna kill you.
I really, really enjoy the performance. I have not seen many of his works, and we will obviously look at a big one that he won Best Actor for, a huge film that won Best Picture, Patton, which he was, rose to fame with. But this was a very, very great performance, and I think it's one that I wanted to shout out because there were a lot of picks for Best Actor. I mean, this is filled with so many good acting performances, and I wanted to pick one that maybe was a little more unconventional because everyone kind of, there are some that you would go to first just off the top of your brain, but I went with one that I think deserves just as much credit. So I went with George C. Scott.
Great pick.
Yeah.
So I'll go with my actor now. I was actually in between 2.
Okay.
And it was the 2 I was in between was Maximilian Schell and Charles Boyer.
Cool.
I'm gonna go with Maximilian Schell.
Nice.
The reasoning being is because well, I mean, I was really high on this movie. I thought it did like such a great job with such a heavy subject matter. And it really put it in perspective. You wonder what those trials are like, and then, you know, you get to kind of see what they might have been like. And I think Maximilian Schell had like a really interesting role because he had to be the defense for like this her horrible person. And you know, just this whole side basically he was the defense for. And you know, he has some like really, you know, yeah, and it's a showy performance, but he has some like big yelling parts and stuff.
In 1938, Your Honor,
he basically puts the world on trial too. He's like, you know, he's in his defense, he's like, you know, my client was doing, you know, exactly, you know, what he was told. And, you know, so if he's if he's guilty, so is the world, because you guys stood by and let it happen. And, you know, the other thing that I wanted to note about this movie was that, you know, it's just interesting because, yeah, like, you know, a lot of people just didn't really know the full the full effect of like what was actually happening and stuff. So I think that this movie really noted a lot of different perspectives on the subject, because it's not just hating one side and stuff. And it's like, well, you know, a lot of the people just didn't really know what was going on. So, you know, I felt like he really crushed that role and made me think about that. So
and it's interesting in the scope of so many like just household names in that cast that he's the one who wins the Oscar. I think it's, you know, just shows how good his performance is. So now we're getting to the Best Actress, and I believe I'm going first for this, or you're going first for this? You're going first.
I'm going first. Yeah. This was kind of hard because there wasn't like a ton of like really great ones in my opinion. Like even like Judy Garland, I was like hoping, I was like, could I pick her because I love her so much? But then I was like, well, her part is so small. And so I ended up going with one that I actually really liked and I thought was one of the best parts of the movie she's in. And I went with Piper Laurie. In The Hustler. You know, I'm a little biased. Like I said, she's in Twin Peaks. She's also Mrs. White in Carrie. And she just has like this big drama, you know, aspect to her. Like her voice is kind of like insanely iconic. And I really just like her character a lot. And like the scene in between her and you know, Paul Newman, I could have easily just picked Paul Newman. And it was if I liked the movie a little more. But you know, she just when she's sitting there like, you know, talking about, you know, drinking, and then he's like, you know, what do you go to college for? And she's like, I'm not doing anything on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And she says, and all the other days I just drink. They know me around here, you know, stuff like that. So I don't know. I just really liked her performance in that.
What do you want me to do? Just step out in the alley? Is that it?
So I'm going with probably an obvious choice just for me, just knowing how I like the movie, and she did win the Oscar for it, and she's hailed as one of the greatest supporting performances in film, and that is Rita Moreno as Anita in West Side Story. I'm really excited to see what Ariana DeBose does with the role, because I'm a fan of hers as well from just different Broadway shows that I've seen her in. But man, I mean, she is someone who has a great presence in the beginning of the film, but it's really the ending where she almost kind of takes over as kind of the main character, because she has that moment where she's singing A Boy Like That with Maria, and she's, you know, lamenting because of her loss, because she was in love with Bernardo and how he's gone, and she almost takes that anger and envy and like kind of pushes it onto Maria, and basically is the reason why Tony ends up dying, because she's so bitter that she tells all the Jets to tell him that Maria's dead. So then he feels hopeless, and it leads to his death. And obviously that's not a great thing, but it's obviously understandable when you're in her shoes and the anger she's going through, losing Bernardo. I think she just has a great screen presence, even though she's not the one singing all the time. She still does emote very well. I mean, the scene where she goes into with the Jets and gets kind of beat up and harassed by them, and then immediately then has that switch where she does kind of set the foreground for that final end moment. She really just runs away with the film for me at the end.
And you still don't know. He is one of them! No, Anita. Yes!
I'm really excited. She's also playing the Doc role in the new movie. So instead of Doc, I think it is a woman who runs that store or whatever, and she is playing that role.
Yeah.
So I like how they're bringing her into it too, because she really did stand out in this film and really honored that material. So those are our picks. So for Best Picture, of course, our Best Picture is Judgment at Nuremberg. Chad's Best Actor is Maximilian Schell. Mine is George C. Scott in The Hustler. Chad's Best Actress is Piper Laurie in The Hustler, and mine is Rita Moreno in West Side Story. Overall, a great year. It's one of those years where a lot of these movies were unfamiliar, and I think they'll only get better the more I think about them. But some of them I wasn't blown away with, but one of them is like an all-timer for me, and I'm glad we have it. And one of them gave us an all-time character that I can't wait to see. I did look up The Color of Money is not a Best Picture nominee, but I'm sure when we get that year, we'll talk about it. And I can't wait to visit that film. But a lot of good movies in this slate. And we're going to be talking about some good movies next month because we're transitioning to the holiday season. So we figured it would be only fitting if we picked the one Best Picture year where there are 2 Christmas movies. It's very rare that we'll get one Christmas movie as a nominee, but to have 2 in the same year, we had to go with it. And that is the year of 1947. Those movies, the first Christmas movie, The Bishop's Wife. We also have Crossfire, the Best Picture winner, Gentleman's Agreement. Great Expectations, which was written by Charles Dickens, who wrote Christmas Carol, so it's kind of a stretch. And then, of course, Miracle on 34th Street, the other Christmas movie. So
One
we
of
got
my favorites.
2 Christmas movies, a Best Picture winner, a movie written by a guy who wrote a Christmas novel about Scrooge and all, and then another movie, Crossfire, which I know nothing about, but I'm excited to visit for the first time. These movies are all under 2 hours, so it's a much shorter bunch than the others. I looked at all the runtimes. Bishop's Wife is 109 minutes. Crossfire is 86 minutes. Gentleman's Agreement, 118 minutes. Great Expectations, 118 minutes. And Miracle on 34th Street is a very crisp 96 minutes. So I was reading the time and the date and the 34th. Got all confused, but yeah.
It's a different part of the city.
We're talking about. These are all new movies to me, which is probably a shock to Chad that I've never seen Miracle on 34th Street, but this gives me the excuse.
Yeah.
And Chad, I'm assuming you've seen at least one of these.
Yeah, that's the only one I've seen. Cool. Miracle on 34th Street. I love that movie. I'm showing my cards now. I adore that movie. I don't know if I'll like any of the other ones more. I kind of doubt it, but
I was gonna say
I just also love the Christmas season, so that's pretty much all I watch in December.
This feels like me last month when I was talking about West Side Story. It was very clear I was going to probably put it toward the top, and I was going to love the movie. And this kind
of. And I hope I didn't break your heart. Dude,
no, I mean, and again,
I just had to be honest.
Yeah, and it's also just one of those things, just the backgrounds we come from and what we experience and like what's ingrained in us. I know people who have never seen like a Disney animated movie from the Renaissance because they were born like at a weird time, and then like I talk about how much I love Lion King, and they're like, that movie for babies, and I'm like, you should watch it. And then some people just don't like it because that's the thing. It's like generational, and some movies are like that. I think
it'll probably grow on me. I imagine.
And I think with the remake, it's going to just be a more modernized sound too. So you might have more appreciation for the songs themselves. And even if you don't like it, that's your taste, and that's that's what we're here to do. We're here to go through all the movies. I've probably broken your heart on this ranking once or twice before,
probably,
you've had a very, very respectful poker face and not call me out on it, so I'm not going to call you out on it because our opinions.
We're nice people here.
Yeah, if you would put Fanny at number 1, I might have just I might have been a little like.
I mean, it was almost there, but
it was almost there. But I just.
But I mean, this makes me want to check out the actual musical West Side Story and listen to the music more, and then
it's cool on stage too. Yeah, just the energy, because there's so much energy behind it too. Like it's a very energetic musical. Obviously, I mean it's about gangs fighting one another, but yeah. So Grease is probably Chad's superior gang musical right now. But who would? Here's a good question: who would win in a fight? I love
the Grease songs.
The Sharks, the Jets, or the T-Birds? Who would win?
Well, the Greasers.
Yeah, the T-Bird. Yeah, the T-Birds from Grease. They do have the car, which is cool.
I don't know. I don't think. Well, unless they just like run over all the Sharks and the Jets, because like the Sharks and the Jets, they don't play around. They bring knives.
That's right. They're true.
So
they don't mess around.
And I mean, the Greasers just have cones. So
Kaneki might be able to take one of them, but I would give the edge still to the Jets or Sharks. Anyway, that was 1961. Thank you for joining us here on Picture This, where we will continue our marathon until we have seen every Best Picture winner ever. And we're excited. We're coming up at the end of the first year, and we're going to be getting into 2022. Once we get to the Oscar season, we will be covering the 2022 Oscars. Some of the movies we've obviously seen already. We don't know if they will be nominated, but I'm sure they will, some of them. And some we have yet to see, including maybe the new West Side Story. So stay tuned. Thanks for talking, Chad. Always fun as always. And we'll see you guys next time. Rest in peace, Stephen Sondheim.